Thank you so much, Tanzi, for joining us on the Huddle Wisdom podcast today. Really appreciate you being here, Tanzi. The the listeners would have had a little bit of an introduction before we started, but just in case people missed that, I understand that I know that you are a clinical psychologist. I consider you a friend and a colleague, and we've shared lots of mutual patients over the years. Yeah, I'm really grateful that you could join us today to talk a little bit about what you do. But I was also really keen to pick your brain about how we can support children who are anxious and how we can help kids who are anxious to feel courageous about seeking help for their anxiety. So thank you again for joining us today. I wondered if you would like to share a little bit about yourself and tell the audience, who you are, what you do, and you can be as brief or as long as you like.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much for having me, Devin. This is a new experience for me, and I'm really pleased to be here learning how to do something like this, or just, I guess, recognizing that it's not so scary as I thought. So thank you so much for this opportunity to share some of my sort of learnings from over time and working with young people, and also just some of my thinking around anxiety, which just seems to be everywhere we look at the moment. So yes, my name is Tanzi Bennison. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I work predominantly in private practice at the moment here in Tauranga. And so I see mostly children, young people and their families, but a huge part of that work is supporting adults as well in their parenting. And this tough journey of parenting that's full of challenges. So I draw on my clinical experience and training, but also on my own experience as being a mom. I get it. It's hard to feel like you're doing a good job some days. So I really enjoy that part of my work as well. And overall, it benefits the young people that I'm supporting and the young people just trying to make their way in the world out there.
I can really relate to that because we have kids at home ourselves. Being a dad, sometimes I feel quite guilty that I'm not doing the things that I'm advising parents or educators to do, because in the heat of the moment, when your own emotion kicks in, it can be quite hard to just stop and think and just be, right, and then and so one of the things that I really appreciate about talking with other colleagues like yourself is that I think it's a good reminder that parenting or raising kids is not easy. And I guess I don't know about you, but I do consider myself lucky that I've got the space, because it's part of the job, to actually just think about parenting, because that's what part of the job is. And and so I think we have a little bit of not an advantage, but maybe I think we're in a privileged position that we can sit and reflect about how to parent kids, whereas other people who don't do this sort of work, they don't have the time or the energy or the space to do that. They do their non-clinical, non-psychology, non-psychiatry work, and then they come home and it's hard. It's hard.
It is absolutely. And even for those of us, in the know, who have the privilege of, access to all the resources and the science and each other to kind of bounce ideas off of. There's still days where I'm not getting it right, so I guess the big thing that I try and keep in mind is that that there's no such thing as the perfect parent. We don't have to be perfect. In fact, I would try not to be perfect, because I think that does a big disservice to our children as well, but actually just having the best of intentions at heart.
Yes.
And I have no doubt, that every parent I've ever met has the best of intentions. They want the best for their kids. And we just don't give up trying to kind of improve ourselves to offer them the best that we can. And there's going to be some days that are chaotic and that are messy, and that is part of the journey. And that's not necessarily going to be damaging to our kids. It's just, we've got to pick ourselves up the next day and start again and again, try to do our best. But also, I think we have to get better at leaning on each other as well. We've become very independent in our view of parenting and feeling like we have to do it ourselves, and we can't share kind of those challenges or those perceived failures with one another. And I think we do a real disservice to ourselves, because we're feeling increasingly more isolated in this really, really tough job that was always designed to be done really more as a tribe or as a group. Rather than alone. So I see that as a huge factor these days that is stressing us out. We're doing it all by ourselves, and we don't have the benefit of being able to sort of really connect with others on a more meaningful level and actually just be authentic and true. And this is who I am, warts and all sort of thing. We try really hard to cover that side up. And I think it can make us feel even more disconnected than ever.
I like what you said there, because I think, when we think about how do we transfer these sorts of values to our kids, where we want them to learn to recognize their limits, but feel okay about that, and also know that they don't have to pretend not to. They don't have to pretend to be okay when they're not. And I think it's helpful for parents, like what you were saying, to be authentic with their kids, because then you can model that to your children. And I think that's very, very powerful, because as you know, kids learn stuff by osmosis, and they just pick stuff up. They're like little sponges, and sometimes they pick stuff up that you don't want them to pick up, but they do anyway. So I think being mindful of our limitations, our the sad reality of parenting as an island. I think I think it helps us to preempt problems as well. So I mean, with that in mind, you were talking about how we were supposed to do this work, parenting as a tribe, as a community, as village. Do you have any advice, or have you in your work with parents and families and kids who feel alone or isolated? What sorts of things do you find yourself telling them? How do you encourage them to connect, to step outside of their comfort zone and link in with others?
I think it's got to be a conscious choice that you make, because I think, the reality is we're all busy, like really, truly, we're very, very busy. We pack a lot into our days, and that is just the way that the Western world has become these days. But I think what often slips down our list of priorities is that connection, that connectedness, because it does mean that we have to be vulnerable. It does mean that we have to kind of be true. We have to kind of open up about things that we don't have all figured out at times. And so we kind of prioritize the things that we feel like we are in control of and that we do have figured out. And I think that is causing a lot further sort of disconnection amongst us. So I think, I talk a lot about conscious values-based choices. And I think this applies to adults, young people, and children, that actually, if you know what really truly matters to you as an individual, if you're really clear about that, then you can make really conscious, considered choices about how you respond to situations, how you organize your life, how you go about your day. So you kind of use your values, what really matters to you, the battles worth fighting for, as like a compass, as a guide in terms of how you go about your life. Because we might all kind of list, a set of values that sounds amazing on paper, but the way that we live is what we prioritize. Like those are our priorities. So the choices that we make every day, if they're consistent with our values, then we've got a really great formula there for life satisfaction. But if the choices we make every day are inconsistent with what we've written down as our values on a piece of paper, then actually the choices we're making are actually our priorities. Those are what we are putting into action. And if that's inconsistent with what you value, that can lead to quite a lot of disconnection and dissatisfaction. So I guess getting back to your question, Devin, it is really about making really conscious values-based choices about what you want and what you need in your life to be at your best. And human beings are social animals. That's the way we're designed. That's the way we were born to relate to each other. We're stronger together than we are apart, even though it's challenging together a lot of the time. So if you want more connection, if you kind of want to break free of this sort of independent kind of isolated version that our lives can often become, then you do need to make a conscious effort to prioritize time to spend with people. We can talk a lot about having relationships with people, but unless we actually make a point of spending time with people, that's just a theory. It's just hope. It's a wish. It's not an actuality. And being with people is not always the easiest way to go. Sometimes it's much easier just to do it by yourself.
Yes.
But if you want value connection and you want that sense of connectedness and you want less isolation, then it means taking a big, brave step in that direction and actually making that happen rather than just talking about it.
Do you think that it's getting more difficult for kids and teenagers to intentionally seek connection with people like that? And the reason why I'm asking this is just because I'm quite aware that we live in quite a digital age, and there's so much exposure to all kinds of social media distractions, and I think there's something to be said about meeting with people face to face in the flesh. But we do know also that for people who struggle with social anxiety and connection, that they prefer to choose the path of least resistance, which is to communicate with others on social media. But we also know that social media is a two-edged sword, because you're not always going to be exposed to sort of a broad section of society. You're going to curate your own people, which might not be healthy, but you get sort of drawn further and further into that. So I like what you're saying about being intentional and deliberate about seeking out people. So do you have things that you advise parents to do, or to say, or to help their children to start connecting with people in real life?
Yeah, I think technology and devices have a place in our lives. We can't deny that. And I don't think that it's necessarily helpful unless you start right from the beginning when your kids are very, very little about saying none of it. Because actually, they'll go to school and suddenly devices are a huge part of their education. And it is a huge part of how they socialize. So I think having really clear boundaries or guidelines in any home around sort of technology or device use, I think is really important, particularly to keep our kids safe on there. But I have seen it even in my own home, particularly with my son and his friends, is that they really do connect over the technology side of things. And if he weren't playing some of those games, he would be out of the circle at school. He would have nothing to talk to these kids about. And when I watch them playing, like sometimes we'll have some friends over here with him and they're playing together. They're playing like a sports game online together. And actually, that's more social than I've seen them be in lots of other environments. So I think it has a lot to do with kind of how they're connecting and engaging and what role the game plays in that, and also what they're playing.
Yes.
Because you have to just be careful about the messaging that's coming across. And I think this day and age, you know, gone are the days where you can just hop on your bike and go down to your mate's house 2 minutes down the road and their mom is home and you just pop in and out. Like, some families are lucky to still have that, but the majority of families don't have that, in that parents aren't getting home till 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. Kids are out and about at sports, at after school clubs, whatever it is. And so you can't just hop on your bike and go see your friends like you used to as easily anymore. So I think that, you know, the online side of things does help with connecting them when they can't get to each other. But I don't think it should be an either or. I think it has to be a both kind of scenario, that yes, you know, devices have their place, and well monitored, then actually it can be really useful. And particularly for those kids who really struggle in like a face-to-face social sort of scenario, yes, that can be helpful. But I think because they've got that online social world, doesn't mean that we completely give up on the real world, on the real life world. And I think it's got to be an ongoing work in progress where individuals are being exposed within what they can handle and manage. And for different individuals, that will be a lot less or a lot more, depending on who they are and what their needs are. But I think there's got to be a conscious attempt to be amongst the world, be amongst people, because it's really, really good for our mental health and well-being.
Yes.
We weren't designed to kind of just operate in isolation. And these days we can actually do that. We can get away with doing that. But it is a very small life. And, you know, I suspect that it's not nearly as fulfilling as it could be. And, you know, some people are a lot more introverted. They don't like the big parties. They don't like being surrounded with people making small talk that they're never going to see again. And that's okay. But let's tailor it to the individual and who they are and how they are, in terms of, okay, but, you know, you can still perhaps come with mom to run an errand, or, you know, we could walk the dog and be out amongst kind of our community and our neighbors, or we could head over to the park and, you know, play on the swing. Like, we can still be amongst people without kind of saying, right, I'm going to go to this party that's really going to throw me out of my comfort zone, and it's like a sink or swim situation. So it's just got to be a conscious attempt to socialize beyond home. Home is our refuge. It's supposed to be our safe place, ideally. And that's where we're comfortable and we can do things that we enjoy and we feel safe. But we can't do that while excluding this whole other part of our experience and our existence.
Yes.
Because that would be limiting so many opportunities going forward. And you know, it's not good for us.
So there's no, we can't apply a black and white mentality to the use of social media. It's almost as though you're saying that it doesn't, I'm sort of paraphrasing what you're saying, but it's almost like it doesn't matter what the medium of connection is. It's more important that the connection happens in whatever way that you can manage it or get it. Which I guess, which makes sense, because if we're all different people with different skill bases and you know, capacities, and we all have different tolerance to stress and anxiety. So if we're socially anxious and we can use social media to connect meaningfully, who's to say that's unhealthy? So yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think it makes it's quite reassuring, actually, you know, because there's a lot of social political rhetoric about the you know, the harms this moral panic about social media, and it reminds me of the social panic that moral panic that people had when comic books became popular, and then after that it was like what was it, like video games and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And I
But
think it's just like we don't know what's coming with these things, right? So we want to protect ourselves. But I think it's not one or the other. It has to be a bit of everything, and each of those are managed according to individual needs. But just because you're connecting online or, through social media doesn't mean that you shouldn't then also be thinking about going out in the community now and then. It's both. And we have the opportunity to have both. So let's use both.
Tanzi, I wanted to ask you about what you thought of what seems to be like a surge in anxiety in children in our wider communities. It seems that we're seeing that in clinic, with severe cases of anxiety, as you know, but it seems that more and more people are talking about anxiety, or at least they're starting to say things like, I know so and so with an anxious kid. It seems to be much more present now. I don't know if that's because we're just more aware of anxiety being a thing, or people are more comfortable about talking about anxiety, or maybe something is happening in our society that's agitating kids and teenagers now. I wonder what you think about that.
Yeah, it definitely does seem to be on the rise. Like, I think I'm seeing more young people than ever, and younger coming through with quite significant anxiety difficulties. So particularly just in the last 5 years, it feels to me, from what I see coming through my clinic door, that anxiety is on the rise. I think you're right. I think we're getting better at kind of labeling it or naming it. We kind of know that this uncomfortable feeling is anxiety, but we're still not very good at how we respond to or manage that. And I feel like that's kind of at the crux of why so many are coming through, say, my doors as a psychologist and your doors as a psychiatrist, that it's actually, I think the experience is the same. I think possibly the way that we're set up in our culture these days, and again, kind of even just relating back to our disconnect with one another, I think that's creating a huge sense of loneliness and anxiety and kind of worries about not being able to cope or not being able to manage, because it kind of goes against how we were designed. But I think, a lot of our systems, particularly in education, do create quite a lot of anxiety. They are quite rigid in a lot of ways, although at the same time, we're trying to kind of create these modern learning environments, which have, lots of different options. What we know with young people is that actually they feel really safe with boundaries. They feel very safe knowing kind of this is the rule. This is where you're expected to kind of operate within. So having those really clear, consistent boundaries creates a sense of safety. They know exactly where they stand within that. And I think we're sort of losing a sense of that in a lot of different settings. But I think as well, adults in general are super anxious, and we're not managing our anxiety very well. Like, we're overwhelmed a lot of the time because of the lives we live and the expectations and the perceived responsibilities that we have. And again, not having a really wide group of people to kind of bounce ideas off of and feel supported by. We're kind of expected to have it all together and be independent and not show any kind of weakness or uncertainty. So we're kind of trying to fake it till we make it, but we're not making it. And our kids are kind of seeing that. And at the same time, we're kind of giving a very clear message that you have to have it figured out too. You have to have it. And most kids are kind of like, I just want to do what I want to do now, which is how kids are meant to be. But I'm noticing, particularly at college, at younger and younger ages, they're kind of expected to have it all figured out. much sooner than I ever remember feeling like I needed to have it figured out. I still don't have it figured out.
Yes.
So I think there are these kind of pressures and expectations that are kind of being picked up along the way.
Yes.
As you said earlier, like we adults are the most powerful role models for our children and young people, and they're watching how we do it. And we are masters of avoidance. We will do anything to not have that uncomfortable conversation or acknowledge our responsibility in that mistake, or kind of own it, or kind of be like, oh yeah, I wasn't at my best today, or I felt really overwhelmed and I didn't have my thinking brain on, like we're the last to kind of just own up and say it, because we don't want people to think badly of us, or that we're a bad parent, or a bad worker, or whatever it is. So we're trying to fake it till we make it, but then when we make mistakes, we don't really want to acknowledge or own that. We just want to move past it. And I grew up, in a generation of kids where we were really to be seen, not heard. So we were never really asked to kind of name how we felt. That was never really appropriate. So we've got a whole generation of parents now, I think, who were never really taught how to regulate their emotions in front of others. It was kind of like, just keep it in, bottle it up, or move it to the side, or pretend it's not there. And now we're trying to parent kids, and we're realizing that those strategies and those techniques don't necessarily work either, but we don't know a different way of doing it. So, I think we don't have the toolbox or the skills necessarily to kind of teach our kids about not avoiding anxiety. That actually what we need to do, the antidote to it, is like opening up to it, being curious about it, kind of learning about our own anxiety, its presentation, its triggers, its symptoms, and working with that and trying different strategies and different ways of responding to it to find out, what works best. But we as adults aren't doing that a lot. We're kind of just trying to shove it away or push it under the carpet and pretend it's not there. And so our kids are like, whoa, what am I supposed to do? I don't know.
What would you say to a parent who's in the throes of that struggle with themselves, where they feel they might not be regulated themselves or have the skills to help their young person who they see as struggling? Is there some sort of protocol, or what sorts of tips would you have as a form of like mental health first aid, for parents wanting to help their kids? Do you have any tips for those people?
I think first and foremost, it's just acknowledging that anyone who has a brain is going to feel anxious, that's a really, really normal part of being human, that it's an emotion. And what we know about emotion is that it's fluid. So it's always changing, but we tend to kind of hook into the parts that we fear won't change, that will kind of keep us stuck. So we got to just kind of know that, yes, feeling this way is really, really normal. I have a brain and my brain gets anxious sometimes. But how I respond to that is completely in my choice. So, I can do what I've always done in response to feeling this way, which is possibly avoid. But that actually perpetuates anxiety. That actually makes anxiety bigger and stronger. It gives it more power. Or you can respond in a way that maybe is more neutral or takes some of that power away. And first and foremost, what I would always say is, like, if you can't calm your mind, start with the body. So calm your body first. So if you recognize those signs and symptoms that anxiety is creeping in, you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling really stressed, just stop and focus on calming your body. And that can be as simple as just taking one big, deep, calming breath right from your belly. And if you can get that belly breathing going rather than the chest breathing, that's going to send a signal directly to that emotion center in your brain to say, hey, chill out, we got this, so that's going to calm your mind. So you do have that toolkit within you. You've just got to choose to use it. So first, it's recognize how you're feeling, acknowledge that it's really normal, and then choose how you respond to that. And you can choose status quo, how you've always done it, knowing what that outcome will be, or you can choose a different route. You can choose to practice something slightly differently, or even just choose to pause, take a minute before you react. So just creating a little bit of space there to calm your body, calm your mind before you respond can be what it takes to respond in a way that you're more proud of than if you just kind of react on autopilot the way you always react. And that's a really valuable skill to teach our kids. You know, that's key. It's really simple, but really effective.
There's so much in that I want to unpack with you, Tanzi, but we are running out of time, I'm afraid. And for my listeners who want to know more, this is probably a good time for us to segue into me asking Tanzi. Well, Tanzi, how do we get more from you? How do we, lock in with what you're doing? And I mean, do you have a website? I understand that you've got a new program coming out, which is very exciting.
Yes.
I wonder if you could spend a couple of minutes telling people how they can access that.
Yes, great. Well, so as you know, I'm based in private practice, so I'm still seeing individuals there here in Tauranga. But I don't have a website for that. You can just go onto the Praxis on 7th website and find me there. But this exciting program that I've been developing, it's really been a passion project for me, particularly over the last 3 years, but it's been building since 2015 when I first started running a version of this program in schools funded through the Primary Health Organization. And I was going into schools running this program with groups of students who were identified to be anxious and who would benefit from the program. And what I realized is there just wasn't enough of me to go around, and I wasn't getting to all the students who could benefit through this program. So I had to think about how I could reach more people. And so I've designed this program called Chillax, and you can get all the information and details at www.chillax.org.nz. But really, it's an anxiety skills program that's designed for schools and the classroom setting. And the idea is that teachers or SENCOs or RTLBs or any sort of staff working within schools can deliver this program. Ideally, it's designed to be provided to the whole classroom. So again, moving away from pathologizing anxiety and rather normalizing it. So like the experience of anxiety is something we all experience. Some of us experience it more intensely than others, but the skills and strategies that we use in response are the same. And really that's about creating this sense of connection. Like actually we all have brains, so we're all more similar than we are different. And we can all use these skills and strategies to help ourselves, but also to help each other out when we're having a tough time. So my dream is that any child who's feeling anxious, they can go to their neighbor or their teacher or their parent or their best friend or their best friend's mom or their swimming coach and say, oh, I'm feeling a bit nervous right now. And the people around them will have the understanding and confidence and I guess a few skills to say, that's okay. I'll just stand here with you and let's just do some belly breathing. You know, because one of the biggest things that I find in my practice is that, you know, I'll have parents or teachers call me about a young person who's anxious and their biggest fear is they don't want to do the wrong thing. And I really want to build up that confidence in our communities that actually we all have the tools and skills we need to manage anxiety really effectively, that not everybody needs to go in to see Davin or Tanzi or our colleagues to manage this, that we can support each other in managing it effectively. So Chillax is part of my response to this. We can all do this together. And I really, really hope that lots of schools will pick it up and use it as just part of their teaching around health and well-being. So I'm really hopeful that we'll get it off the ground. It's been wobbly during the pandemic because schools have been under a lot of pressure and change. But I can feel the momentum picking up now. So anyone who wants to know more, please go see the website. Feel free to get in touch. You can just click on the contact us bit and you'll go through to my lovely administrator, Dana, and she'll point you in the right direction and give you all the info you need. And of course, I'm based here in Tauranga as well. So don't be afraid to reach out.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Tanzi. I wish we had more time, and I'm going to share the links on the show notes as well for people who want to go and check it out. But I'm very excited about the Chillax program because it sounds very much like it offers a framework for parents and teachers to stick what they already know onto it. Because it sounds like it's not so much what you do, but how you do it. And, you know, and if we can connect in an authentic way with other people, I think, you can sort of tack on any tools you want, as long as you're making a connection. And I think that's wonderful. So thank you very much, Tanzi. I'm going to check it out myself. But
Yay.
I don't know if you have any other things you want to share. We've got a couple more minutes. And
yeah, I think I've said the big bits there. You know, I feel like that sense of connectedness with one another is important. And of course that we have to tap into our courage and our brave to do that, to have those conversations and to kind of be vulnerable with each other. I think we're kind of on the brink of wanting to do that and feeling ready to do it, but it's just going to take some brave individuals to take those first steps to make it safe and okay for the rest of us to follow. So it's just getting better at kind of naming how we feel and recognizing it and putting it out there and knowing that it's not going to last forever. It's a temporary state. If you let it pass through you and you choose your responses wisely, hopefully it won't grab hold and become, you know, a clinically significant issue. But, you know, having said that, if it does, then people like you and I are out there to help with that as well. But I don't think that everybody needs to come and see us necessarily, that these are skills that we all have as human beings and we can support each other in it.
What an encouraging word to end on. Thank you so much, Tanzi, again, for taking the lead with the program. And yeah, I hope that we can catch up again like this. And so
yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
And again, for listeners,
yes.
I will put Tanzi's details in the show notes. So if you want to check that out, I do encourage you to do that. All right. Well, hey, Tanzi, thanks again. And yeah, I hope to see you next time for
yes.
another very, 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 very invigorating conversation.
Thanks for listening. Right. Lovely to see you.
Yes. Okay. We'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.